Welcome to Fine Arts Missouri Educators for August 17th, 2023. I'm Phyllis Paisley, Executive Director of the Missouri Alliance for Arts Education, and I'm so pleased to welcome today Latausha Cox and Kira Hegeman from the St. Louis Art Museum. Welcome to both of you. We're so glad to hear from you today and learn about some of the great opportunities that are available for Missouri teachers through the St. Louis Art Museum.
Well, thanks for having us. So, hey, Phyllis and Sean, and anybody who's watching. So we were going to talk. Actually, we were going to share some of like our engagement strategies that we use with our students, which I think. So we weren't going to go over like all of our programs and field trips, but we were going to look at some specific strategies we use on a couple of our programs that might be translatable to classroom settings, or also might just be of interest if you want to bring your students on a program or a tour. So we thought we would kind of teleport everybody to Forest Park. So here's the museum in front of the park, and we have the student voice through visual arts engagement. So we wanted to focus kind of acutely on ways that we're kind of encouraging students to have choice and to have voice and to kind of creatively engage with the artwork and think about how it relates to their kind of personal experiences and lives. And it actually, the weather today is almost as sunny and warm. And so it feels like this photograph is not from today, but it feels like it could be today. And so we were going to start with a little warm-up activity. And so we could do that with the four of us that are here, but we could also just, for those of you who might be watching a recording, you can either do this with your colleagues or just do it for yourself. So we thought we would just warm up with, these are two artworks in our permanent collection. And so we have Vessel in the form of a badger, and then this jaguar over here. And so we like to imagine with the students that if they were to come alive at night and kind of get out of their cases and their places that they live in the museum currently in their current state, and they were to come together, what might they say to each other? So imagining what kind of a conversation they might have. So we can just, if you want to write it on your page or just imagine that. I don't know if anybody here wants to share, but I'm not going to put anybody on the spot necessarily. We often get I always imagine the jaguar, even though he's got those big claws, being very friendly and kind of like, hey, how are you? What are you doing? So this is also kind of an example of some of the ways that we like to kind of encourage students to be creative and to think about kind of the relationship between the artwork and also just to have fun. So we want the museum to be fun and the arts engagement to be fun. So what we were going to do today is talk about, we're going to give a little context about a couple of our kind of longstanding programs, and then use that to showcase some of these strategies, as I mentioned. So arts in the basic curriculum, Tasha's going to talk about a little bit more, has been going on for 30 years. And then we've also had a historic partnership with the Anti-Defamation League to present programming that really encourages students to explore bias both implicitly and explicitly. And so we've been working on kind of a new version of that to align with the Anti-Defamation League's No Place for Hate programming. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, and then the ways that we are kind of structuring our programming to work with these programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Tasha for a minute or a few minutes.
Oh, sorry. For a second, my computer just like went, the screen went away.
You're back now.
Everything went dark and I got an error message. So I thought that I had lost the Zoom. So ABC Arts in the Basic Curriculum is a multi-visit program where it's designed for 4th and 5th graders, but we can adapt it to other grade levels. And so it's schools have the choice to come 2, 3, or 4 times during the school year, and they're going to explore. They can choose from 6 different themes to explore during their visit. And so these are all about engagement in all kinds of ways and having fun in the galleries. And so we do that through open-ended questions, lots of conversation. It's student-led conversations, activities, like writing, meditation, movement, sound, exploring our senses and activating our senses in different ways, and exploring the collection. So we're looking at artworks that span thousands of years, things that were created not that long ago, and things that were really old, ancient works, and having an interactive experience with them. So the goals of ABC are just being familiar with the museum, building that familiarity, having a sense of ownership, to see the museum as a resource for learning. We also want students to explore the range that our collection has. So like I had mentioned, just honoring that contemporary, historical, and cultural intersections that you can find in our collection. We want to actively participate in conversation and hands-on activities. So we're activating sketchbooks. Everyone in this on this field trip gets a sketchbook, and we find creative ways to engage by writing and drawing and all kinds of ways that we can activate the sketchbooks, but we can also activate our bodies and our and connect in multiple ways. We want them to be hooked. We want students to want to come back, to want to bring their friends and their family, and to invite others, and to also use the things that they're learning on these visits to like give a tour with their families. They can facilitate a tour and show them how they can really be engaged with the artworks that they are seeing. We want them to reflect and make personal connections. So when we're asking questions, it's questions that are directed to their own experiences. What do you know? What would you think? What would you do? We want their story to be found in the galleries, and to explore that a little bit more, and then to gain appreciation for visual art across media and makers. And so, that's really understanding just the varied communities and people that are showcased through art. So what are those themes? What are the ABC themes? We've got amazing art materials, which focuses on the materials that artists use. Artists in the outdoors is focused on nature and art. Full Steam Ahead is focused on STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. The storytelling and art is all about telling a story. So how do artists tell stories? What are the parts of a story, such as like a setting, plot, those different ways that we can build a story, as well as telling stories with visual art. American Journeys is all about the truths and triumphs of being an American, and how artists, we talk about the artist stories, their personal journey as an American, and also what are our stories? How do we find and talk about our stories as Americans? And those look different for different people, and they're based on their experiences. And then Powerful Portraits is all about mainly faces in art, but also understanding what a portrait is and can and can't be. So we discuss, could it be a portrait if it's an animal, or if it's the back of someone's head and not their face. So just exploring multiple ways that we view portraits and portraiture.
Yeah, and so we had mentioned that program is specifically for 4th and 5th grades students, but as Tasha mentioned, we can adapt it, and we also try to use kind of similar principles with all grades. And so even if it's like middle school or high school, we still want it to be conversational and constructivist and really student directed and guided as much as possible. And so I had mentioned this partnership with the Anti-Defamation League. And so we have kind of redesigned our program to align with No Place for Hate, which is a student-led anti-bullying, kind of anti-bias program where students are really working as leaders in their schools to build an inclusive school climate. And so No Place for Hate has a variety of activities that schools and students can do to kind of promote that kind of culture in their school. And so we are working with them to create basically a museum visit that would be an offering as part of their program for students in the school. So it's been in a pilot phase for this last semester, so it's not quite like launched for full tours. But we did think we wanted to share some of the activities that have been successful and the ways that kind of students have been responding to them. So the way that we've been focusing the tour is kind of on this theme of using your voice, but really what's your superpower? So we're still using artwork as a catalyst for conversation, which has been a historic element of this partnership with the Anti-Defamation League, is sort of artwork as a gateway for conversation and as a gateway to explore human experiences, to recognize that we all carry bias and assumptions in different ways, and to kind of help people be aware of that so that we can try to, minimize it as much as possible. So that's still a part of the selection of the artwork and a part of the program, but also thinking about how we can empower students to recognize their own kind of superpowers, as we call them, or unique skills and abilities and talents. So we're looking at that angle of, here in the art museum, we've got artists who are using kind of their creativity, their skills as an artist to voice something, to share a perspective that might be different, sometimes to really actively advocate for a change that seems meaningful to them or to the larger community. But that even within the art museum, the artists have a variety of different superpowers. So some might be really great realist painters, some might be sculptors, some might use words. And so recognizing that there are a lot of ways to kind of be a participant in your groups, in your societies, in your schools, and that every kind of way is valid, so that all of these talents are really useful and meaningful. So we have this little story. I realize that this slide is fairly wordy, but this sculpture, that's Portrait of a Woman by Edmonia Lewis, and sharing that story that Edmonia Lewis was really the first sculptor of African American and Native American descent to receive international recognition, but really faced a lot of challenges along that way. So she became an orphan at an early age. Her mother was Ojibwe and her father was Haitian. And then so she was raised by her mother's tribe, and then went to Oberlin College, which I don't remember the dates, Tasha might know, but this was like also for a woman to go to college was also, a feat, but then a woman of color. But then was forced to leave for racially motivated reasons. So she was accused of stealing, she was attacked, she was left for dead. So she saved enough money and moved to Rome, which a number of artists of color from the United States did, and sort of actually ended up being more successful there. But then is quite a famous sculptor, so was able to really realize those talents and those superpowers, and now, is a voice through both her artwork and her experience. So that was kind of just a little bit of a taste of, some of the stories that kind of connect the artwork and this program. And so we wanted to share, not necessarily the overall program, but again, like I said, some of the ways that the artwork can be used to kind of focus the conversation around certain issues and the ability students have to share their voice. So we are going to share a few examples of some of the ways that we do this, and also recognizing that, in the context of a museum visit and a tour, we're still kind of controlling the narrative in a certain way. Like oftentimes the artwork is selected by the guide or by the theme. And so looking at ways that even within that constraint, we can give students choice and opportunities to kind of shape the conversation or to be creative or to make different choices. But also recognizing that we're still looking for ways to really empower the students to kind of build their own experiences with the artwork in the museum. So I'll pass it on to Tasha.
Okay, so one of the ways that we do this, we give them choice, is through gallery exploration. So that's where we go into a gallery and we allow students by giving them a prompt and then allowing them to explore the gallery on their own. using that prompt. So an example might be if they could, a character from one painting could jump into another. What would happen? What would the adventure be? What story could they create? What's the conversation? And so they can explore a gallery, such as a gallery that has a bunch of portraits in it, and think about what would happen if those portraits were able to have a conversation. Another way is for them to just find an artwork and sit in front of it and think of what story that the artwork is telling them. What are they getting from that work of art? So we love introducing gallery exploration. It's also good for to take that time for the facilitator to step back and just observe and be there to support the students, but allow them to move about and see what they're connecting to. So another strategy is using word cards. And this has become very popular with facilitators and also with students. And these are just a group of words that are laminated on a sheet, and students can either choose one randomly and then find an artwork to connect with that word. Or they can be more intentional and go through the cards and select something that a word that they feel matches. And we have used these word cards in all different kinds of ways to engage, but it allows students to have that choice again, but also thinking about giving them kind of that vocabulary of how they want to talk about the artwork. And so like, that's a fun one that they can hold up and say that like this artwork is magical, and then explaining and then asking them, what do you see that makes you say that, and having a little bit more dialogue connected with those words that they're choosing.
Yeah, and I have a couple of them. It's hard with the camera, but they use the little cards. So they're super easy to carry. And as Tasha mentioned, there's so many opportunities. So, you could build a group poem with them. You could lay them out in front of the artwork so everybody can see them. You can make it more of a game where it's like a surprise. But we've had some really great experiences where the students have a word and they go around a gallery and like pick their artwork, and then we all go on a gallery walk and they kind of talk about why they chose it, and then it opens up conversation with their peers about the artwork, about the things they see. It can sometimes, as Tosh mentioned, have that conversation of what do you see that makes you say that, and it can sort of open up the conversation about other things that people see, about maybe kind of contextual information that you want to add. So they've been really successful, and I feel like they're a pretty easy thing that can be translated to a classroom. So even for like a class critique of each other's work, so just that as that starting point where it gives students kind of a language to start a jumping off point, or for kind of art critique or interpretation. So I think they've been fun. And sometimes the arrow works to move the slide and sometimes it doesn't. So okay, here we go.
And then these are some ways to just imagine how you would change a work of art. What would you do if you were the artist? So, like for example, this work of art by Tony Smith, Free Ride, where the students, we asked them like if they could reimagine what this would look like, what would they do? What would the new view be? How would they change it? So if you're taking this sculpture and you're recreating it, how does that look? And like the artists actually took boxes and to create kind of a plan for themselves of what this might look like. So if we're thinking about it in a similar way, then this sculpture could look a number of different ways. And so just bringing that imagination into the galleries and the conversation. And this is a similar idea, but thinking about how could these two pieces connect? What would you do to connect them? And also we could think about that using our bodies. We could do it in with our drawings. We could think about how this twist changes and the colors change as it intersects. So like what shape is missing there, and filling in what that gap might be. So it's another way of thinking about how to recreate something if you were the artist.
Mhm. And so, yeah, I feel like we included like a million examples in here, but we do love jumping into painting. So if anybody is looking for some great starting points for engaging students in conversation about artwork. So this Douglas Square by Ellen Rowan Cricht has so many great points of departure, including thinking about the sounds that you might hear and having students make those sounds, and being able to voice and be loud in the gallery spaces is kind of fun. So you can do like a symphony where everybody says their sound at the same time. But also thinking about that autonomy, like if you jump in this space and you can go around, what are the choices that you would make and where would you go? And being able to share those with your peers and kind of learn the different choices that people make and why they might go somewhere. So we've got, you might go on the tram and see if you can go somewhere else. You might play with the kids. I mean, just a variety. You get the people who want to go way back to the lighthouse. So loving that opportunity also to like recognize that there are a lot of different ways to experience an artwork and to experience the world and life. And then also we had mentioned earlier those kind of personal connections. And I just want to also preface that these questions and these activities tend to be part of a stop that might be 10 or 15 minutes that might involve some learning about kind of the history of the artwork or the artist or the stories behind it, some kind of close looking and sharing observations. So it's kind of, a part of a larger conversation that, depending on how the students are interacting, could be longer or shorter, But thinking about those personal connections and how the work of other artists might inspire our own work, or as students or just as artists in the world, or also connections to kind of other subjects. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be visual art, but so a lot of like writing, and other things. But so for this one, we talked about the kind of connection to your ancestors. And so this is a Yoruba crown, but thinking about kind of symbols that are meaningful to you and things that might give you power, and how you might design an accessory such as a belt or a hat or a bag that's inspired by an ancestor, and what that kind of like history and relationship might mean to you. And then again, bringing it back to that sort of choice of what are the materials that you would use, how do they relate to your story? So thinking about kind of everything that artists do is a choice that has some reason behind it or meaning behind it. So those materials might have to do with what's available, or they might have to do with the story or the connection. So thinking about, if you have like a quilt or something that's been passed down, and how you might incorporate that into your artwork. And this is kind of specific, but I also just love this gorilla. So that's part of why we put him in here. But we had talked about some of the themes in ABC, and so we use this one in storytelling and art kind of as a starting point for thinking about building characters. And so this could be visually, this could be performance, right? It could be musically, it could be through writing, it could be in a number of different media, but thinking about kind of that inspiration. So if you were to develop a character off of this sculpture of the gorilla, and so it could be, I think, as fantastical as you want. So like a gorilla can be a businessman or something. And then thinking about the qualities of your character and what it is in the artwork that kind of inspires you to think that. So we're always coming back to that sort of evidence-based reasoning of like, what do you see and what does that inspire? How does that inspire your choices? And part of why we included this in this presentation is also to come back to that, the ways that we can pair kind of student choice with more kind of pre-planned stops. So we like to start with this character development with this gorilla, and then take your character and go into a larger gallery. So in this case, typically tends to be kind of landscape based, and think about what's a setting for a story for your gorilla. So using that artwork as the starting point for that setting. And so allowing students to explore that space on their own, to think about their character, to think about the story they want to tell, or maybe just the landscape that is appealing to them. and to think about what that kind of story would be. So kind of trying to get multiple elements in there of working on building a story, but also allowing students to take it in the directions that feel like they're valuable to them. So yeah, we're going to shift a little bit to the ways that so we have been working longer with ABC than with our No Place for Hate tour, but we are using some of the same strategies. And so the ways that we've kind of built on these strategies, but to align with this No Place for Hate theme of kind of combating bias and promoting allyship. So, Tasha.
Yeah, so this activity is something that I really enjoy. I think it allows us to be a little bit vulnerable and in our conversations, and also just having some personal reflection. And so this artwork is called Canoe Shield. And so we start off by asking just what do you already know about shields? And so a lot of times the answers are like it's used for protection, things like that. And so we shift the conversation to talk about how there are some invisible shields that we have that we create for ourselves to protect our emotions. And so those shields, there's these assumptions that people make about us, and that's sometimes when we put these invisible shields into place. And so the phrase that we complete together is this: just because I'm blank, and they fill in the blank, people think I'm blank. The truth is blank. So my example is, just because I'm quiet, people think I'm mean. The truth is I'm really friendly and shy. But I like to kind of have this start at a certain point on the tour, where we can kind of take a moment to have this personal reflection and really just examine how we respond to or how we complete the sentence. And then another way to engage with this work of art is to also just list words. What words are powerful? The things that we say have meaning and can hurt or can uplift. And so what are some words that you can use, or phrases that you can use or say for yourself that you can pull out in times when you need to either have encouragement for yourself or to help others? And so, like, developing that list of words and phrases that you can go to when you need some additional support. And then, so a part of our No Place for Hate tour takes place in our print study room, which is kind of a private space that anyone can reserve, but it allows for you to see works on paper, because works on paper are more fragile, and so they can't be on view for a very long time. So they rotate a lot, and so it's an opportunity for us to, especially for this topic, there are lots of works on paper that are applicable and that are not in the galleries, but we can access through this space. And so this is one of the works that we show in that space. And it's a way to engage in an intimate setting, and have these conversations. And it's also a way to get really close to these works on paper that are, a lot of times not framed. And so you can really see what the artist has created. So, and you can see it up close. So this prompt, this activity here is where we're talking about like the prompt or the plots that you would find in comic book series. And so, if this were, like, if you could imagine that this print was a moment of conflict, in a comment? What are the actions that are taking place? Who might be the main characters? How might the story achieve a happy ending? So we understand that, not every story has a happy ending, but if you could complete this story and it would end on a happy note, what would that be? And then having a discussion with the partner, and also being able to write or draw those ideas. And so there's always a lot of times the happy ending is achieved when, or what students will share is that the people who are walking the opposite direction would turn around and embrace in some kind of way, include the person who is facing the audience. And so they find different ways of inclusion, basically. So we also talk about using the same work of art, that characters in comics usually have these tools that they use to protect others, like Spider-Man has his webs. Some have these suits or vehicles that they use that allow them to have this extra power and ways to protect others. So thinking about our own tools, the things that we already possess, what are the tools that we can use for others to protect others? That could be our voice, that could be our talent, that could be our creativity. So it's really interesting to see how students respond to that question. And this is also part of No Place for Hate. And the question is, would you rather, thinking about the roles that we play, would you rather be a superhero, a supervillain, or a civilian? So looking at the artwork, we ask, how would you assign those roles to the figures there? And so it's like, what would happen if we were to change, those roles were to change? So what we automatically think, what if it were different? How would that affect the story? And so then thinking about our own lives, our own experiences, like what is that? How does roles play in our own communities? So, what are those things that we automatically think about other people just because of the way they look, or like the monster? Why does the monster have to be the bad guy? That's a question that we have to analyze for ourselves. And when we're looking at this work of art, the assignments of the roles are always, everyone seems to choose the same, but that's a way for us to really examine our own, I guess the way that we look at others and how we judge others and how we make those assumptions, like we mentioned before. So we have an activity where you can think about personality traits and kind of reveal how you can use your own superpowers for good. And then consider these characteristics for like in conversation about this topic and this artwork, but also connecting to your own experiences.
Yeah. So I feel like I should have mentioned that. Oh, I got really dark for some reason then. That you could do these activities along as we're doing it. You can do it yourself. So, but this is another one that we love. And one thing that's not in this PowerPoint is we do a lot with movement also, and sort of like posing or really trying to embody the experiences of the characters that we might see in the museum, or just a chance to like move and think about that kinesthetic learning. But we don't have examples of that in this PowerPoint, but I think that's another valuable kind of engagement strategy. But this Glenn Ligon is a favorite. And so the questions on the side are really first just an example of kind of some of the looking questions and ways to explore this painting. So if you look for 30 seconds and kind of talk about what stands out to you as you look at the painting. And then, you know, as you look longer, what more do you discover? So that also comes from, you know, I think there's the statistics that people spend like 10 to 20 seconds with a work of art before they move on. So thinking about that idea of that like meditative and slowing down, and what do you discover around you when you spend more time to kind of pay attention to something. And then inviting people to try to kind of unpack the words in there. So it begins with just trying to read it, and then thinking about what's the message here. So the statement on it is that sometimes I wish to express my sensations in my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds which broke from me frightened me into silence again. So both unpacking kind of the message that's in those words. So for students, some of that can be also just helping them to like understand what the words are and maybe define them if they're younger. But then also thinking about the artist's intent. So why might he obscure in this way as he goes, as you read down the painting? I have to move my box. Hold on. Okay. And so one of the things that we talk about with this artwork, and we use it for a couple of reasons. One is just because it's a really great opener for conversation about kind of like that experience of not being understood, or maybe being perceived in a certain way, and then sort of like trying to make yourself understood and feeling like less and less like it's coming out in the way that you mean it to. But also to show that like sometimes artists use words. So it doesn't necessarily, to be an artist doesn't mean you have to be able to draw perfectly, but there are lots of ways to be creative and to express things visually and in other art forms. But in this case, Glenn Ligon, who is still alive, he's a Black male artist, often will take text from literary texts and use it in his artwork, and often to kind of comment on experiences with race and social invisibility. And so in this case, he is quoting from Mary Shelley's 19th century novel, Frankenstein, which we all know the story of Frankenstein probably, but of this monster that was created by a person and is shunned by society because of his appearance. And so in this case, he's using these words to kind of address like his experiences related to race and yeah, just his personal experience. And then also we use this to come back to that, the power of words. So Tasha mentioned that earlier with the canoe shield, and thinking about that they can be used for hurt, they can be used to inspire, to empower, they can be used to heal. So there are lots of different ways that words can affect us. And so one starting point is just to think of like a sentence or a phrase that has meaning to you. So I think quotes are used a lot, like people have inspirational quotes or song lyrics or things that just kind of get them going and make them feel more confident or brave. And then from that is an activity that we have found really successful that we've really enjoyed. So we've been doing this in the galleries, but I think it's another one that could kind of be easily translated to different environments like a classroom. And so we just have, it's really 3 pages. So this is just 1 page. And then there's 2 more pages on the backside of this this half page from the book. That's just an excerpt that's actually from like an abridged version of Frankenstein. So we purposely selected a portion that had kind of like accessible words for younger audiences. And then what we invite the students to do is just mine the text. So go through and find words that stand out to them that kind of feel like they're inspiring or give them power, but also just stand out to them, and to circle or underline them. And then if there's time, we invite them to arrange them into a poem, or that's something they can do when they get back to their schools. And then to share that, and it has been just really amazing to see kind of the different words that people choose, the different things they gravitate to, kind of the different tone of the words, and then also like the poems that come out of it. So we find it as another great example of like the sort of many interpretations that can come out of one single thing, so everybody's given the same text, and it can really produce a whole variety of responses. So I don't know, Tasha, if you want to share anything either from your experience with that activity, but.
I think that it really shows us just how different, like we can all look at the same thing and we have completely different views. So many different things come out of the same text. Some will focus on, being very, like, it's very happy. It's like, this, like, even I just was looking at the word happy and just thinking about, like, someone will choose like a bunch of positive words and someone else will choose like, darker words, and it'll have a completely different meaning. But it's coming from the same place. So we can also speak to what that means and how, we all approach everything differently. And so, we might be just looking at this text, but you can think about it in a larger context, and apply it to our personal experiences.
Mhm. And it can also be done, so I often do it where they circle or underline, but it can be done where you sort of black out the words that you're not choosing, and then you're kind of left with a found poem. And so I did want to credit, I meant to credit at the beginning, but Tasha and I sort of developed this content, or we developed the content, but we also collaborated with Arsinia Tate and Jillian Botnick who worked with the ADL. And so we did have some collaborators from the ADL that I wanted to give them credit as well. And then we think that reflection is really important. So one component that we try to do in all our tours is have a period, even if it's short, at the end to do some sort of reflection activity that can be both on the experience, but then also sort of on takeaways to help students kind of just take a minute to think about that and to maybe process anything that comes up. And then with the No Place for Hate tours, we also have been inspired by a particular work of art that I'll show in a minute. But in thinking about kind of the roles that art can play in terms of sort of like activism or change or social well-being, I guess. So thinking about how artwork can accomplish a goal or solve a problem or make a statement, exploring ways that artists might advocate through their artwork, thinking about that relationship between creativity and activism and how we can creatively advocate for something. So this is specifically like, that would be artwork that's really oriented towards kind of activism. But so we like to give this for No Place for Hate as a takeaway activity. So we're still, as I mentioned, this is a pilot program, so it's not officially launched, but wanting to have takeaway resources that students can take back to their schools that they can either follow up on their experience at the museum with something active or reflective, but then also something that they can share with students who might be in the school who might not have been able to come to the museum. So a way to extend that learning experience. But also this doesn't have to be specific to No Place for Hate, so it could, be used in other ways. And so we have an artwork in our collection that was on view, I think about a year ago, by Damon Davis, who is actually local. He currently lives in St. Louis. And this is a part of his All Hands on Deck series. So what we have in the museum are 7 lithograph prints of hands. And so these are, I guess, 6 of them, because the 7th one was in a different exhibition. And here's a person just for scale, so you can see kind of the size of the hands. And so what Damon Davis did was during the protests in Ferguson after the killing of Michael Brown in 2014, he was really out there in these protests with people and saw a lot of people of all different kind of backgrounds coming together to protest what had happened. And so he took photographs of people with their hands in the stop, don't shoot position, and then blew them up, and then they pasted them on the boarded up storefronts in Ferguson, also as a symbol of solidarity and of the community coming together and calling for change. So we use this as kind of a starting point for students to think about the ways that you can use your creativity to support something or be a voice in your community. And so Damon actually just came to the museum a couple days ago. I think Sean was there, and talked to teachers. And one of the things he said is that, he's an artist. He's always been an artist, but that he uses his art. That's what he has, and that's what he gives to the world. And that's how he interacts with his community and shares stories. And so one of the ways that we sort of think of that artwork is as inspiration for students to think about what kind of impact they might have on their community and how they might put their ideas into action. And so thinking about kind of in their local landscapes, or it could be more national or global, but just thinking for them, what are the issues that they're concerned about? And, I think sometimes younger people don't always get a voice in the decisions that are made at kind of a city level or a state level or a national level, but that they are very much a part of our lives and experiencing the same things. And so, like, as I mentioned, it could be something at their school, in their community, maybe more globally. And so to invite students to choose an issue that they want to focus on, and then to do some research. So they're coming from an informed position. So we suggest the library, online, the community, maybe interviewing people, going to visit sites. And a great example of that too is Damon Davis has another artwork that's a monument to the Mill Creek neighborhood that was basically demolished in St. Louis as a part of a sort of city planning gentrification. I don't know the right words for that, but it was a really thriving Black community that was basically demolished because the city had other plans. And so he did quite a lot of research into those stories and that history to help inform an artwork that he created to bring those stories back to light, to kind of excavate the histories of the people that live there. And so inviting, Sean, did you want to say something?
Eminent domain, is that the word you were looking for, or no?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I wasn't putting it into the best words, but they basically, just forced everybody out and tore down the houses. And then thinking about, we also are encouraging them to ask questions, to kind of listen to those around them, even if it's a position that they don't agree with, so that you really can get a big picture and come from an informed position. And then develop a work of art or a project or something that either addresses the issues or teaches somebody about it. So we think about, there's some artwork in the world that, might be specifically to filter water or something, but it also is a work of art, or something that is just bringing something to light or putting it out in a space where people might not have otherwise seen it. And so some ways we think about it could be even just drawing a picture, making a poster or a sticker campaign or a chalk campaign, taking photographs, as many artists like Damon Davis and JR and others have done, a book or a zine, which is a historic kind of DIY way of sharing stories and art and information, sculptures, and then having students think through the process of creating something. So how you begin with an idea, how you sketch it out, how you take it to a final project. So we haven't done this part of it with students. We kind of give it to them, and if they do it, that's great. So we don't know if people are doing it or not, but we wanted to share that idea as something that could be kind of a takeaway and a way to extend this experience to a more kind of active space for the kids. So I think that's it. And did you want to add anything, Tasha?
No, I think I'm good.
So that's that. Yeah. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or thoughts they want to share. But
I will share that. Thank you so much, because this is such great ways to introduce deeper learning or continue that with our students, teaching for it, partnerships with the museum, really integrating some SEL with a lot of the anti-bias. And I was thinking of Damon Davis and maybe Brock Seals. One of the two coined that word artivism, which is, art activism. And I thought this has been great. I mean, so thank you so much. I mean, I'm sorry to be your only attendee, maybe, but and the strengths of students, emotional strengths, has all been just integrated into really the art, which is why we're all here in a way. Right? So ways to help them maybe navigate the world.
yeah.
So thank you.
Well, thanks, Sean, and thanks for coming. I know you've been in PD all week, so
yes. Well, this was great.
Nice
Thanks.
to see you again. Yeah.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
I want to thank you both for putting together such a great presentation and sharing it with a wider audience here in Missouri. And just so excited to help other teachers know about the great resources available at the St. Louis Art Museum, not only interacting with the collections, but actually interacting with the museum educators who have prepared these wonderful lesson plan ideas and experiences for students. So thank you both.
Well,
Thanks for
thanks
having
for
us.
having us.